Hey everybody, welcome back. This episode I'm going to be looking at a couple of speakers somebody sent me from Jamo. Actually, we're just going to look at this one. I'll shoot a different video on this little stand mounted. Let's look at the center channel first of all though. It was a good one, let me tell you. Woo-wee! Jamo. This thing is the Jamo D8 center channel, and first thing we always do with this stuff is just set it up and take a measurement. Let's see what we're dealing with. What does it look like? And let's just get right to it. Let's just throw up the on-axis frequency response measurement of this thing, and yeah, it's pretty rough there. There's a huge peak at 2,000 hertz, and the output level by 20,000 hertz is about 12 dB down from that peak. So there's quite a range there. It is configured with dual binding post. Let's look at where it crosses over, and as you can see, this tweeter mid pod here doesn't play very low at all. It's almost as if there's really two tweeters. Even one tweeter in a horn like this, you'd think it would gain a lot of lower frequency output, but it does not. So because of the higher crossover point and the farther, acoustic centers, as you move left or right off axis, it does become a little bit of a mess. If you let's look at the horizontal off axis. If you'll stay within 10 degrees off axis, maybe 15, you're kind of within its range. However, its on-axis response is so all over the place that it's a mess before you even start moving off axis. And as you move 30 and 40 degrees off axis, obviously the woofers cancel each other and it completely falls apart. Going up vertically, as we go up or down, we'll notice that there's some cancellation going on at the crossover point between the tweeters. A little bit where it's around 7,500 hertz. You'll see them start to cancel, where one in time is delayed compared to the other enough that at that wavelength they start to become out of phase. So you have to stay pretty level on these things. Looking at the spectral decay, we can see that there is some stored energy there where that hump is, but not a lot. It's almost more of an amplitude peak. Just a little bit more stored energy because of the wavelengths being longer. And then looking at the impedance, we can see that it drops to 4.3 ohms. The grill was not that much of an issue, and we did a before and after, I think, with the grill on there, and the grill had very little effect. It's really thin and just snaps into these little snaps here. The binding posts on the back are just like these. This one has been put back together, but this one has the same binding post, so I'm going to show you on this one. Then it has some of these beautifully gold-coated nuts that hold those things in, and then they feed through the crossover, and then there's another set of nuts on top of them. What's bad is these real pretty little gold-coated nuts, they're steel. They're all steel. Like all of these. Like, why would you do that? Why would you put a ferrous material right around the binding post so that the whole signal has got to pass through a ferrous material? That's going to hold some residual charge there when you start passing electricity through this thing. It's going to smear the signal. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And it's on the inside of the speaker. They didn't need to be gold coated. Why would you gold coat steel? That makes no sense to me. Could have put a little brass one on there. At least it would have been non-ferrous. The crossover on this one was a little more complex than what we've got out of this one. This is the crossover out of that one, but they're exactly the same. Polyester film caps, sandcast resistors, and it did have some air core inductors that were small gauge. This one is kind of starting to come apart because they don't have any straps holding these things together. They just have the varnish holding it together, which is a recipe for disaster. One hard hit and this thing's going to fly all to pieces. Also, they had this really high-tech wire on this stuff. They've got the wire that says Jamo high definition flat speaker cable. It's a braided wire. And for some reason, I guess they think this braided geometry is going to sound better. But what does not sound better is when the wire oxidizes. And as you can see, the wire is somewhat brown. And on the ends, you can see clearly on this one, they're turning green. Especially on the tweeter one here, it's very green. And it was worse on this one. It's a three-way, so it had more of this stuff on it. And the wiring was very green. You want to degrade the sound of your signal to your speakers by a lot. Let the wire oxidize. Oxidated copper is not conductive. It's a contaminant, and it will ruin the sound of that stuff. It will eat the high frequencies up. It will sound muted. It'll sound dull. It is the worst thing you can do. And this, whatever this PVC material is here, it is not sealing this wire up very well. Either that or the ends are left open, and it's just oxidizing right up the dielectric. So, wow. Like, Jamo, I don't know what to say. I mean, your frequency response is all over the place, and your parts quality is really poor. The cabinet looks beautiful, nicely built, fairly thick, pretty on the outside, crap on the inside. Wow, so the next thing was, let's look at these individual drivers and let's see, what do I have to work with? What can I do with this thing? So first, let's look at the response of the two woofers. It looks pretty rough there, as you can see, pretty jagged. In fact, let's keep that response there, and right under it, let's put the spectral decay so we can kind of compare. If you look at the spectral decay, you'll notice there's some ringing going on at the upper range of the woofer, and there's a little bit of stored energy going on in the lower range of the woofer. Not great, but you know, if I could cross it to where I can get a lot of that breakup out of the top end of the range, I can get that away from it, then maybe not too bad. It all depends on how low the mid will play. Let's look at the frequency response of the mid. There's the mid, and let's look at the spectral decay right below it. You can see it's almost more of an amplitude peak. There's slightly amount of more stored energy right there at the peak, but not a lot. And as you can see, it doesn't play down very low at all, and it's not very usable. If the manufacturer I was working with sent me that, I would definitely send it back to them and say this is unusable. And I work with driver manufacturers all the time. We develop our own drivers, and there's a lot of things going on there that could be causing this. The throat of that waveguide, obviously, it needed to be reshaped and redone. There was no reason for it to be sent out with a response like this. And it does show up in the actual frequency response of the speaker. They didn't account for that. It's as if they calculated some electrical parameters and said, this crossover should work, and just calculated values, put it on there, and sent it out the door. Why didn't you measure this thing? Anybody measuring this thing could see that this is a mess. The tweeter response is not that bad. It doesn't play down very low, but it's not that bad, and we don't have any stored energy in the tweeter. So what am I going to do with this thing? Well, what I did with it, since the mid-range dome is practically unusable, is pull its level down really low and use it as a filler driver. So let's look at the new crossover that I developed for it. You can see the woofer level has come way down. If you look at the original, you can see that the woofer levels were way up there at 90, almost 93 dB, 92 to 93 dB. And I've pulled them way down. Now, the way I did that was I had to run these in series to bring the sensitivity levels down so that they match the tweeter. Running these in parallel, the woofer level was way higher than the tweeter, and you can see in the original measurements there that the bottom end was a lot higher than the tweeter, and the tweeter and the mid were kind of playing on top of each other. So in order to fix it, these two are now in series. Also, if you look at the original impedance response, let's look at that. I forgot to throw that one up there. It dips to 4.3 ohms, and a lot of that is because the woofers are in parallel, and there's also not much on the bottom of the mid, so it caused a fairly low impedance there. Why in the world would you create a center channel that dips down to 4.3 ohms when you know good and well a lot of these guys are going to be powering it with home theater receivers, and you start ganging up 4 ohm speakers on a lot of these receivers, and they're not going to like it. Those receivers have one power supply for all channels driven, and a lot of them will say they'll handle 4 to 8 ohm speaker left and right, but all channels driven 6 to 8 ohms, and that's because they don't like ganging up a bunch of low impedance drivers on them. It just draws too much current from it. So I don't know why in the world they would do that, but they did. Anyway, going back to the crossover that I created for it, woofers in series, brought the level down. It's about 89 dB now. Mid is way down in output, just using it to kind of fill some of that space just a little bit. The tweeter's response looked okay. I did no resistors in the tweeter's response because it wouldn't play any loud. That's as loud as it's going to play. So you have to bring everything down to that level. There's actually only one cap on the tweeter, which was surprising. I didn't need to do a lot of correction on it. There's a pretty good little amplitude peak there. It's about, let's see, 2, 3, 4, about 5 kHz. I could have put a notch filter on there and try to smooth it out, but I mean, why? It's not huge, and I was able to get that with one capacitor, so that's what I went with. There's a little more aggressive filtering going on that mid to pull that thing way down. Then on the woofers, there's basically a second order filter with a big notch filter at the end to try and clean up some of that mess. It worked out really well. Let's overlay the driver's responses with no crossover on any of the drivers so you can see just what I had to work with. You can see that that's as loud as the tweeter level was going to play. That's with the woofers wired in series. And what I did was use what we call baffle step compensation to bring that woofer level down to where it met the tweeter level. And then I just dropped that mid way down there at the bottom. So the on-axis frequency response now is really balanced. The vertical off-axis now looks pretty good. You can go up or down. Doesn't change very much. The horizontal is about like it was because the mid just simply won't play down any lower. The acoustic center spacing is what it is. You move left or right too far, one woofer's delayed in time versus the other, and they cancel each other out. So you're good if you stay on axis or if you stay 10 degrees off axis. So if you have this on in a center channel position and you're sitting on a sofa and it's centered on the center channel, so the middle of the sofa is the middle of the center channel, you can move to the left or the right seat and you're fine. But you start moving off to seating in, way off to the left, you can see the yellow line is 20 degrees off axis, and then where it gets bad, the green and the blue line, those are 30 and 40 degrees off axis. That's rough. The impedance still drops to about the same level. We're still around 4.5 ohms, I think, on the impedance, 4.3 ohms. So because we've got that mid dropped in there too, it's still low right there at that range. Couldn't help that, but as you can see, it's higher at the low frequency, which is better because that's where the receiver is going to have to deliver its current. A low impedance at the high frequency is not that big a deal. There's not a lot of current demand at the high frequencies. At the low frequency ranges, that's where it's drawing current, and we're much higher now, so it's going to be a lot more friendly to the receivers after this upgrade. And looking at the spectral decay, it's fairly clean. There's still a little bit of that stored energy down there in the woofer range, a little bit lower. I didn't play with it much to see if I could get that out of it, but I would suspect if you added just a little bit more insulation behind each woofer, that some of that lower level stuff might clean up just a little bit. So that's what I was able to do with this thing. We're going to do a budget level upgrade as far as parts, do some good JB polycaps, US coils, good quality resistors, but nothing crazy. I can't see putting a lot into this. If you want, we may do an option where you can use a single sonic cap for that one tweeter. We'll do that as an option. And we're gonna throw in a set of tube connectors to replace these because these are awful. And all new wiring. Shouldn't have to use any no-res on this thing because it's pretty solid. It's a good build on the box. But we're going to put together a package for you guys and put it up on the site. Any of you guys that have this model, this was a dramatic fix. Parts quality is going to go up a lot. High quality pure copper, 4 nines pure copper, internal wire, and polyethylene. No more of this PVC jacketed, braided stuff that's turned green. The signal will sound much cleaner through that better wire, trust me. Oxidation eats up the signal quality. That's it. We're going to put that whole package together. We'll have it on the site. Hopefully before this even pops up, or as it pops up, if you guys are interested in it. And thanks for watching the video, and I appreciate all you guys watching. Please subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you guys in the next one where we look at this little stand mounted model. See you guys then.